It's not a sprint, it's a marathon. If you are decided that you're going to come first in the marathon, then you can't be coming first in every 100-meter sprint.
You made pretty interesting choices where you moved into a then relatively unknown startup called Flipkart. I'm sure it felt like a much riskier bet at the time. So, what made you make that choice? And looking back, how do you feel it's shaped your career journey?
I think one of the things we need to, or one needs to do, is to take a bet on a trend. You need to have some conviction that this trend is going to play out. And I had the conviction that e-commerce will play out. Be the company itself, me as an outsider, as a customer, was loving the experience. See, when I got a chance to meet the people within, I was convinced. And then I said, if you are looking, as I was saying earlier, to get onto a rocket ship, this is the one.
How do you know it's time to challenge myself?
If you are doing your 5 days job in 3 days, or you have become just too comfortable and you're not worrying too much, then I guess it's a sign potentially there's an opportunity for you to stretch yourself more. Very often, someone's giving you a tough feedback, you immediately start reacting, saying, "Oh, no, that doesn't sound like me," or you start thinking, "Oh, does that mean my ratings want to go down? What implications it has on my appraisal?" Like, you're not listening, you're just overthinking and reacting. If you have the same outlook, it's not the feedback or an evaluation of my last year, but it's feedback that will help me live my next 20, 30, 35 years better, then it helps you absorb better and get better with that feedback.
Today, my guest is Vikram Deshpande. Vikram is the Director of Product Management at Amazon, where he leads seller partner services. He spent over a decade at Amazon, and you'll hear him drop gems on how Amazon thinks. Frameworks like two-way doors and using mechanisms instead of just good intent. But what I was really excited to dig into was why Vikram left a safe, prestigious consulting job at BCG to take on a bet on a fast-moving startup called Flipkart. Yup, Vikram was one of the first 120 employees at Flipkart back when it was a seed-funded startup. And the story of how Vikram upskilled himself to pivot to lead digital marketing for Flipkart, a brand new function at the time. This episode is for every young professional wondering how to use a big shift like AI to supercharge their career growth. Vikram's story is full of smart bets and bold moves you can learn from. The Career Clinic today is packed with aha moments as Vikram tackles your real career questions and shares mindset shifts like leadership reviews aren't exams but a way to get more hands-on depth. Why tough feedback isn't judgment, it's just input to help you grow. And how escalation isn't about blame, it's about problem solving, and so much more. If you enjoy this episode, do follow on your favorite podcast app or on YouTube. It's the easiest way to make sure you don't miss the next episode, and it really helps support the podcast. With that, I bring you Vikram Deshpande.
Welcome to the podcast, Vikram. Thank you for being here.
Happy to be here, Anna.
I'm going to dive straight in. Tell us about your early years. You had that pedigree of bits, electronics, plus I'm Calcutta consulting job. But from there, you made pretty interesting choices where you moved into a then relatively unknown startup called Flipkart. You were one of the first 120 odd employees, and this is when Flipkart had barely gotten, I think it's Series A funding.
Yeah.
What made you make that choice at that time? And looking back now, obviously we know Flipkart for how it turned out. I'm sure it felt like a much riskier bet at the time. So what made you make that choice? And looking back, how do you feel it's shaped your career journey?
I wouldn't say that I knew how it's going to all pan out going in. But now, with the benefit of hindsight, I think I made some choices that were really good. And some of what triggered that was also what I had learned in my jobs, right? Starting with consulting. As a consultant, you go in as an outsider and help solve a problem for your client. I had seen that I enjoyed the most and I contributed the most when I could identify as an owner versus as a consultant for a client. I very vividly remember this case that we were working on for a consumer durables company, where the company was trying to figure out strategy for refrigerators in stores that store chocolates, ice creams. Now it's the trivial thing. I would have never noticed a fridge in a store before. But when I started on that assignment, I would just live and breathe that problem day in, day out, right? That triggered in me that, if I feel part of an organization, an owner of an organization, then that's the one that's giving me the largest kicks. So out of campus, BCG was a no-brainer, day zero company, those standard boxes.
As aspirational as
It gets, right? Standard boxes that everybody looks to tick, I was ticking, so I was happy. But then Flipkart came along and it gave me an opportunity to be a part of something which I genuinely believed would become big in India. And I'm very happy I made that choice. What I was looking for, as I said, to experience rocket ship growth while being an owner in the company, which is what the company was offering me. Also had a very interesting entry into Flipkart. When I joined Flipkart, the founders then had called me and then they had offered me a job as head of analytics or something. And I told them, no, this is something I've done. I don't want to do it again. They said, okay, if this doesn't work, then that's fine. A couple of weeks later, they called back again and they said, we will offer you a job of head of digital marketing. And I was like, okay, this is another extreme. I knew everything about analytics. I didn't want to do one more of that again. And for digital marketing, I had no clue. So I told them frankly that I appreciate the opportunity, but I know nothing about digital marketing. And then they said, it's okay. Take 2 weeks, learn as much as you can, come back and give us a presentation on what you would do if you were to take up the role. And if you like it, then we'll see where it goes. I did exactly the same thing. 2 weeks, I figured out all that entails of digital marketing. Gave back, made a presentation to the founders and few senior folks there. They were happy, and then they were willing to take the bet on me. So I thought this is the company which is gonna give me tremendous learning opportunities. A company which is willing to bet on people if they are willing to put in their hard work. I thought that's the company I want to be part of, and that's how Flipkart happened.
Two, three things to me which are interesting in that, right? Which is one, obviously listening to the signals of saying this, like consulting is aspirational, but this is what actually makes me feel good about work and moving in that direction. Number one. Number two, you kind of willingly put your hand up saying analytics is not challenging enough, right? And you kind of said no to something which probably would have been a safer choice, right? Because you know you can ramp fast and deliver fast. And then I guess the thing which we have in common, and I think you paid it forward later, which is I got my break in Amazon also by the same thing of saying, I don't know this, okay, study for 2 weeks, come back, and then you show that you can learn fast, right? Looking back now, what are the things that you think you did well in your early years? What would you do differently?
Yeah. I think one of the things that I would want to share for anybody who's at the early stage of their careers, right? And I'm borrowing from what I have also seen wonderfully explained at Amazon is through their leadership principles, right? As you start your journey, I think what's most important is to act and behave like an owner, right? If you're doing that, you are not doing a job, but you are running it as though it's your own business, as though it's your own money deployed, right? And since ownership then drives all the right behavior, you will be focused on problem solving, you will be focused on the right problems, you will care about your customers. So all of that, which is what I learned at in my consulting, which is what I applied and helped me in Flipkart and Amazon everywhere. So that I think I did well. It helped me. What I could have done better for me, Flipkart, I got all the opportunities and that I wanted to excel in and to learn. But what I appreciate the most is that my time at Flipkart was like a master class on Think Big. I got a chance being an early employee to look at the founders and work alongside the founders very close by and how to think on what problem to solve, what dimensions do you think of, what benchmarks do you set for yourself. It was just eye-opening for me. And could I have done it better? The answer to that is yes. Can I still do it better? The answer to that is yes, right? Think big continues to be something that, at every stage you get challenged. No, this is not enough. You need to do it better. But having that mindset that no, okay, I have typically seen people do this, companies do this. Can I do a job which is 10x better? I think that's just unconstrains your mind, helps you think of solutions that would have otherwise thought not possible. I think that was one is a very healthy tip. And if you get a good coach, good guidance on how to go about doing that early on, I think it will be a big, big asset.
I think these are all valuable tips. I'm going to have some follow-up questions. We talked about you kind of joining a startup, which of course today is a, IPO'd company and established. We know how history played itself out. But at that point, I'm sure it felt quite uncertain. There's two parts to it, right? One is you moved to what was like, let's say, a sunrise sector, right? E-commerce, because again, going back almost 15 years, and sorry to like vintage you on this, but this was before UPI. This was the time when mobile internet penetration was going in, all these kind of macro things were going in. And if I look at someone today, AI is the buzzword, right? And there's a lot of macro trends around that which are changing. How did you read the macro trends and say, this is what I want to go about? Like, how do you figure that out for yourself? And then number two, when you're joining a startup, what are the sort of things that you looked for that worked out so that, you can kind of de-risk that decision as much as possible?
I think one of the things we need to, or one needs to do, is to take a bet on a trend. You need to have some conviction that this trend is going to play out. And I had the conviction that e-commerce will play out. Things were bad back then. Like you would order online something, and if it reaches you within 30 days, you would be happy. You would be like thanking God for it, right? And Flipkart had launched by then. And, I got a chance to meet the folks, of course, and that helped me build further conviction in the company. But prior to that, I had shopped and I'd seen that if they said this is going to get delivered in 4 days, it would come in 4 days, right? That itself was groundbreaking in terms of trust that any e-commerce player would build with customers in India, right? A, I thought had a strong conviction on the trend. B, the company itself, me as an outsider, as a customer, was loving the experience. C, when I got a chance to meet the people within, I was convinced. And then I said, if you are looking, as I was saying earlier, to get onto a rocket ship, this is the one. Otherwise, I mean, of course, you could choose a more conventional, safe career, and nothing wrong with that. That's how I evaluated the trade off. And the risk at early stage is limited. You can always go back. It's not a one way door, right? It doesn't mean that you took up a job, things didn't work out, and then you are left to fetch for yourself. In fact, I'm seeing these days, right? People who have gone through these varied experiences, failed startups, I think they have learned such valuable lessons that I think it's a chip on the shoulder, and people will look for such people versus those who have had a steady job all along.
So 3 things you said, right? Which is one, very intentional about wanting to be on a rocket ship and looking for a trend you want to bet on. Second, actually trying the product and therefore conviction on this is a product which solves an important problem, and then meeting the team and meeting the founders. That sounds good. Now, as you were responding to that, you very casually slipped this concept of a one-way door. If you can explain it to people on how you think about decision making.
Typically, with the way to think about one-way door or two-way door is something. Two-way doors are one where you can afford to, or where you can fail fast and come back, right? It's a two-way street. Versus a one-way door, you have to be a lot more deliberate, because once you've decided to go in that direction, while it might not be impossible to come back, it's very hard to come back. You will hurt yourself, you will hurt stakeholders dependent on you, etc., etc., etc. Right? A job switch to Flipkart at that stage, also a function of what work at what life stage you are at, etc., was in for me a two-way street. And that one-way door, two-way door decision we use, very, very regularly in making business decisions also. If it's a two-way door, the amount of time you would spend on deliberation would be a whole lot less, because you can deliberate as much as you want.
Test and learn and use
You
the
don't
feedback.
know how it pans out in the real life. For a two-way street, you'll go straight in. One-way door, you will deliberate a whole lot more.
You spoke about two kind of things, right? One, what worked for you was ownership, and one which was a learning was think big, right? So how do you actually operationalize that? How does someone know, am I displaying ownership? Number one. And I guess a related question is, what about sometimes, you feel like the environment is not letting me display ownership? Like, how do you kind of display ownership wherever you are? What does that actually look like in practice?
For me, ownership would show in terms of, am I just doing my job, or am I also looking around the corners to see what can be better? Is somebody else doing things better than how or what I am doing? Having a long-term outlook. It could mean that it sets you or enables you to make short-term trade-offs, but you are willing to stay the course and see the goodness in the long term.
Delay gratification.
Yeah. Do you have that mindset or not? Which you would have if it was your own business. So that's how you can test yourself, saying that, okay, am I displaying the right ownership or not? If the environment is such that, and there could be times in a stage of a company where short-term matters is a matter of survival, right? I can imagine a company wanting to raise a seed fund, and, you could build a plan for 5 years down the line, but if you don't survive for the next 3 months, achieve your short-term goals, then you're not going to get
It's
that
all on
funding, and then
paper.
five years down the line is not going to happen. So will I be stubborn about this? The answer is no. It is all contextual. You need to figure out in what context, what do
In
you
fact,
apply.
ownership could be also looking at the trade-offs in that lens, right? Like survival beats like any plan on paper at the stage of business. So another question, Vikram, I had was, how did you think about growth early in your career? How did you think about growth in terms of promotions, in terms of skills?
So growth, again, I would be honest, look at the standard markers again. As I said, starting out of college, do I have a day zero job? Yes, no. What's my salary looking like? Yes, no. And once you get into a job, how fast or slowly am I getting promoted, right? Those are the standard carrots that get dangled. It's very hard to take your eyes off them. So that's how I would look at growth. But at some stage, I also made conscious choices, and to me, over time also, I have linked my growth more with learning and not have a unidimensional view on growth, which is growth only means way up and promotion. Sometimes growth also comes from you picking up a wider variety of skills. And again, that in the short term might hurt, but in the long term helps your case. So if I had to think of, let's say, promotions that I've had in my career now, some were fast, some were slow. The ones that were slow, of course, hurt. I wouldn't be lying. But when I look at why I got slowed down, because the choice I made saying that, okay, I've done this bit for a while, I need need to pick another skill set. It's like a jungle gym. I'll not just build one muscle, but I'm going to build other muscles too. The path to promotion is fastest if you are focused on building one muscle and you prove that you are better than anybody else and keep moving up. But if you decide to go the jungle gym route, it at times slows you down. But fast forward 2-3 years, you are much better placed having picked up that extra skill and having delayed your promotion by 1 cycle, 2 cycles. But for the next promotion, maybe, or for the next bright opportunity that comes up, you are much better placed. So the way to look at it would be, again, have a longer term horizon. It's not a sprint, it's a marathon. If you are decided that you're going to come first in the marathon, then you can't be coming first in every 100-meter sprint. So that's how I would think about it. And to my mind, I think what matters most is, are you learning? Are you picking up a wide variety of skills? It's like Gen AI, right? You train on one area and then train on another, then you get better on the first area also. So it's just your ability to connect the dots, ability to make the right trade-off, you make better decisions, all of that starts showing up. So growth basis learning is what I would say.
I think that makes so much sense. And I also get the point that you make, which is early in our careers, the markers of growth are very straightforward, right? Which is like package, company that you join, time to promotion. And over a period of time, it becomes more multivariable. I know one of the other variables for growth and progress is changing a company, right? And kind of, I have felt this early in my career, which is like you feel frustrated when you think you're not growing the pace that you should. Now, you've had an interesting trajectory where you have made some changes early on, and then now you've been at Amazon for over a decade. So how do you think about changing a job or changing a company as a lever of growth?
Early part of my career, I switched jobs. And again, I was looking for something more interesting, opportunity to grow, which panned out for me luckily. Since I've joined Amazon, I think I've been lucky. I think my outlook hasn't changed. I'm still looking for a new thing to do every few years. I've just been lucky to have found that new role within the same company. So over time, I have done a variety of roles. Over time, my portfolio has increased in terms of number of roles that I do. So if I have to take the view out that all of those roles are within Amazon, it's akin to joining a new company every so often. And again, driver for that for me has been learning and growth.
As a principle, that makes sense. So two questions, right? One is, how do you know it's time to challenge myself? And second, how do you know where to challenge yourself, right? Like, there's so much noise, there's so many options. Like, you can build soft skills, you can bring functional skills, everybody wants to build AI skills. How do you know what you should actually focus on immediately?
First, I think if you are doing your 5 days job in 3 days, or you have become just too comfortable and you're not worrying too much, then I guess it's a sign that you can do more. Potentially, there's an opportunity for you to stretch yourself more. If you're getting bored, it's okay. I think you earned that boredom, but now you got to stretch yourself more. How and where do you stretch yourself, right? Again, there are people who build strong functional skills, and going deeper and deeper in that functional area makes sense in certain roles. There are general management roles where you need to know ops, negotiations. You also need to understand product management. You need to be able to run large cross-functional programs. You could choose to go in that direction. And there are some things you do better than others. If you are better at managing people, then cross-functional roles are better for you. If you like technology, then something that's at an intersection of business and technology, a product role might suit you better. So it's important to gain that wider experience. There are certain things that you cannot not have in the list of things that you know. AI, for example, is soon becoming that. Everybody's getting familiar with it. People are at a various stage in their journey on how much depth they have built. Given how fast it's, I would say, encroaching on everybody's job, and how using AI you can become much smarter, I think it would be foolish to turn a blind eye at this stage to such a skill.
And I think this links back to the point you said of trends, right? And kind of knowing which trends or which big bets to align yourselves with. I know at Amazon they famously say, which is like, use the trends as a tailwind. And I guess you do that not just for the business, but for your career as well. You had an interesting articulation of, one is just hygiene, right? Like, there's certain things which become table stakes, and that list of table stakes keeps changing, right? So for example, AI would be table stakes for everyone. Maybe execution is table stakes from day one, but something like multifunctional influence becomes table stakes as you grow. You also spoke about functional growth versus general management growth, and I think that's an important vector. Now here, this is very subjective, right? So I'm curious how you think about it, which is, I think there's a part of keeping an eye to external trends and knowing you have to align yourself to them, but also knowing internally what works for you, right? Should you go for functional management or general management? I don't think there's a one size fits all answer. How do you think about it in terms of when to follow the trend versus when to make a choice basis what works for you?
I think I would always say that you should do what suits you. So if you believe that, building depth in a functional area suits you better, I would do that. It doesn't mean that then I turn a blind eye to everything else, right? I would still pick on.
It's not a binary choice.
Yeah, it's not a binary choice in that sense. You can do like 90% of this and still I would cover 10% of the other. That's how I would think about it.
So now we're going to switch gears. We're going to get into the second segment of our show, which is called Career Clinic. As you know, for the Career Starter Kit, we talk to young professionals and we kind of figure out what are the things which are top of mind for them. I'm going to present a situation. If you've been in this situation, you can share how you handle it then, or how can this person think about it. So our first question is about goal setting. What this person is saying is that I really don't know what role I'm supposed to play in goal setting. I think I can contribute to some company priority. I think it's super relevant, but my boss has assigned it to another team member. Should I bring it up to my manager? How do I go about this?
Again, it goes back to how I would approach my role within the company, right? Two parts to it. One, early on, as a person who's starting his career and owning a particular domain, if I were to put myself in that person's shoes, I would focus on ensuring that, I have built the highest amount of depth in that subject matter, right? So nobody else knows that subject matter better than me. So I built my depth, dive deep is what we call it. And then second principle that I use is on ownership, right? So what goals do I take? I know it best because nobody else knows that function better than me. If it so happens that the manager assigned it to somebody else, I as an owner will talk. Right? Maybe there are reasons that I'm unaware of. I'm not saying the manager is always taking a wrong decision or has something against you as a person, as an individual. Maybe there are reasons beyond that, but I would ensure that I let it be known that I have my ideas, I have my thoughts on how this should happen. And if I believe I should be the rightful owner, I would state that. Not just for myself, it's good for me. If I do well, my manager also does well. So it's good for my manager, it's good for the company.
So I guess what you're saying is, which is approach it with curiosity, right? Understand why they're taking that call and then take it from there. Another question which is also related to goal setting, I guess this seems top of mind for people, is how much of a stretch to sign up for, right? So what this person is saying is that we had a certain goal last year. Now our budgets are cut, but we're still expected to deliver similar outcomes. I don't think this is possible, but I don't want to bring it up with my manager because I don't want to come across as, not being ambitious enough. So how do I judge what's a good stretch and how do I push back if I think a goal is unrealistic?
I think that happens every so often, right? For me, luckily, I've been in environments where, I've been given a license to go for it without fear of failure, right? And I think that's a large enabler for individuals within teams. My manager says, it's okay, you have a stretch goal, go for it. We'll see what happens. Versus if I'm told that this is your stretch goal, you don't meet, you might not have a job, then it's a very different situation. Assuming I'm in the first environment, then I would do two things. First, I would make it known that it's a stretch goal. There are building blocks to reaching a goal, and I would construct those building blocks, build that bridge, and show that you want to reach X, but the building blocks are only showing that we can reach X minus. Beyond this is a stretch. Now we will take that stretch, and as we work towards the goal, we'll figure out. I'm letting you know that it looks like a stretch. Most people will agree. And sometimes, if you take a stretch goal, then miracles happen versus you taking a goal that you know how to go about doing it. Of course, that will happen. Shoot for the stars, you reach the moon.
I think this ties to your learning about thinking big as
Yeah.
well, right? Like don't self-constrain. I love the point about being almost like data first in the approach of saying this is a stretch, we'll sign up for it, but first of all, let's all agree that this is what the stretch is. Now, another thing which I think is a very new muscle when you're starting out is following up and getting work done, right? Now, typically, I know when we start out, the managers align the goal and then it's your job to get it executed, and sometimes that doesn't go as per plan. This person's question is that I've followed up in email, I've followed up in person, I've spoken to the partner team. They keep saying that they'll do the work, but then it doesn't happen. So I don't want to escalate and spoil my relationship, but what can I do?
There are two ways to go about doing stuff. One is you rely on good intent, which is my partner team will do it. Most times it works and intentions work out, but in the long run, can't rely on intentions. You need to build the right mechanisms. And then there are multiple mechanisms that you can use to ensure that all the teams are working towards the same. I'm saying if the partner team is pushing back, possibly they're working on something which is higher priority. So pre-aligning what the priority is and getting everybody to agree on that, I think that's something that you could do. Other thing you could do is, for example, take up a joint goal saying we'll do this, both of us play a part in it. It's not happening, then it's saying both of us. If it happens, then of course both of us celebrate. That's another mechanism you could do. The last part of this question calls out was I'm afraid of escalations, right? And in companies, if there is social cohesion, then that company is not going too far. People should be unafraid to challenge each other. And escalation doesn't always mean a complaint. It could just mean that escalating to your manager to allow that manager to help you solve that problem. If it's done in the right spirit, it just unblocks everyone. So I would stay away from social cohesion, and I would not be afraid. I would not irresponsibly escalate every single time, but I would not be afraid to do so responsibly.
I have to add my 2 cents on this one because I think this is one of the ones where I've learned it the hard way. And I think the point that you said, right, which is not being irresponsible about, for me, what I've learned is that one is don't kind of upward delegate the root cause. Like, I think it's still your job to root cause, like, why is it not happening? Is it because the goals are not aligned? Is it because they're working on some other priority? So that when you do loop in your manager, it's more than just an open ended, like, oh, I need help. It's like, this is what's blocked, this is why it's blocked, this is what I need you to do, right? So you loop them in after you've done the root causing. That's still your job. And I think the second point, exactly for me, which was like a big mindset shift, was it's not like you're telling on the other person, it's more like figuring out who are the right set of stakeholders that need to be in this conversation to unblock it. If that's your manager, so be it. If that's some other partner team that's blocking the work, so be it. It's about like do the root cause yourself, and then whoever is the right set of stakeholders.
Yeah.
Right?
And sometimes, if to solve a problem, if you're not talking to the right person, you need a certain level of seniority, then you're talking to junior folks who are just wasting time. You have to escalate right away. Because if the decisions depend on somebody senior saying yes, then going up the ladder you're just wasting time.
So the next situation is, again, this is a new creature which comes in your life when you join the workplace, which is meetings. Now, this person has talked about how they struggle to get meetings on track. Mm-hmm. And I know that especially when you're starting out, you're often like the junior most person in the room, right? And you still need to own the meeting and get it to the right direction. So what they're saying is, I need to get an approval for the project go ahead. Twice I've set up this meeting, but halfway through my manager will ask some question and the discussion goes off track, or some other stakeholder asks a question and things veer off. So how do I get things back on track, and how do I actually get the approval and the go ahead? Yeah, sounds like they're having a tough time getting decisions in meetings.
I will share what happens at Amazon, right? And Amazon has a very peculiar way of doing things when it comes to meetings, right? Which is no meeting happens off the cuff. It's a document review that happens. And what that allows you is to be very thorough in going in with an agenda and with pre-deciding or pre-stating what the expected outcome of the meeting is. Of course, for that, I think the key to do that well is just to prepare, right? Prepare enough so that those 60 minutes or 90 minutes or 30 minutes that you have, which is an expensive meeting because of all the leaders that you have involved in that meeting, is very efficient use of everybody's time. So we at Amazon, and I have seen it most effective, is just like write it down very crisply, clearly, what is the outcome needed. And the best meetings that we say in Amazon are the ones where the doc is clear, but the meetings are messy. Discussions are messy.
Yeah.
Right? That means it's creating enough questions in people's mind. But if you've been thorough about it, you would have anticipated those. You would have called out what trade-offs you're making, what's your mental model, what's your framework in making those decisions. People agree, debate on that, and then you get a clear direction. Of course, I'm not saying that this leads to an outcome every single meeting. You might need a follow-up, but then the follow-up is saying that, okay, we agreed on these 4 things. Now we need to only decide on these 2. So the process becomes more efficient. So the more you prep for it, the better you are able to guide it. What we also very effectively do in these meetings, right, is to clearly call out what's in scope of the discussion. Also very clearly call out what's not in the scope of the discussion. So if anybody's trying to steer the discussion off, he's like, okay, good point. Not for this meeting, not for today. Just helps keep the discussion focused.
So the way I'm thinking of it is that for the rest of us who don't have the benefit of working at Amazon and having these 6 pages, I'm guessing there's still some takeaways, right? So one is what you're saying is have an agenda, and not just an agenda, but first have a desired outcome, right? Like, is this a decision? What is the decision? And everybody knows that. Then the agenda works backwards from it. And then I guess prep, right? Like prepare as much, anticipate all the point of view, anticipate what are the important discussion points leading up to that decision, right? Like all that prep actually helps it go smoothly. And then I love the point about like explicitly saying this is not in scope, so that therefore you can steer the conversation. Now, a particular kind of meeting that people struggle with is leadership reviews, right? And like you said, Amazon is famous for meetings with documents. I know Amazon also has a very rigorous leadership review cadence, right? So what this person is saying is that I get really anxious when I'm grilled in leadership reviews, and I can relate to that feeling. Every month there's so much questioning. Sometimes I feel like I'll plan an entire day off just to prep for this meeting. So is there any way to make these reviews easier?
Yeah, I can totally relate to that. And I myself would have tempted to do take that shortcut at times. But over time, my outlook for these meetings has changed, right? Earlier, my view on these would be that this is like a college exam, right? Where people are going to ask me so many questions, and what if I am not able to answer, etc., etc. But over time, my outlook has been that this is my opportunity to get senior stakeholders engaged, involved, and get feedback from them, get direction from them to help me deliver better, to help me do my job better. So instead of looking at it as an exam, I started looking at it as an opportunity to get more hands to solve the problem that I'm trying to solve alone. And then, just that change in mindset, change in the way you look at it, I think just takes off a whole lot of burden, helps you just operate much more smoothly.
I think that's so powerful, which is a mindset shift of saying, how do I get more hands on deck on this one? Tell me a little bit about how do you operationalize this, right? Because there's still a worry of, I don't want to pass on my problems to the manager, in the sense like I don't want to come across as I didn't do my bit. So how do you think about what to escalate and serve up as help needed versus what is kind of the homework you should do?
Again, the way I would think about it is, if there are 5 things I want to say, then I say on these 4 or 3 or 4 things, I just have an update for you. This is how my progress has been. These were the goals that we had planned. I'm doing fine. I'm not doing well against one of the goals, but don't worry. I know how to.
This is the plan to get back on track.
I know the plan to get back to it. If I'm not able to do it after 3 months, then yes, I'll come back. So out of the 5 things, on 3 or 4, I'm fine. But there's this one area where I am conflicted. I don't know the best way forward. There are these 2 things that I need to evaluate, how to make that trade off. And then I write my thinking about it, saying there are 2 ways to do this: approach A, approach B. I think we should go with approach B. I'm seeking help from you to confirm that approach B is the right way. And then it helps people say that, okay, I understand. I don't need to do his job for him. He's done his job. He needs specific area of help. I, as a senior leader, I'm at a vantage point where I understand the business better than this person knows, so I can possibly help.
So you kind of say that what I love in this is 2 parts, right? Which is you are kind of, again, similar to your in scope, out of scope thing. You're kind of streamlining the conversation, saying these 4 points, this is the status, this is, what you need to know, but there's no help needed here. You're directing them to where the help needed is, and then you're escalating essentially for a decision, where you're doing the pre-work on the options and the pros and cons between the options, but you're saying this is the decision needed. So the leader also knows that, okay, I need to help, and this is what help looks like. This is the last one, and I think this is, again, a theme that a lot of young people here is about, like, learning, right? And you mentioned this as well, which is you should learn, and kind of learning drives growth. I think what this person is like they're kind of facing a challenge, saying, how do I practically do it? So the question is that people keep saying that learning is the key to long-term growth, but nobody tells you how. Like, what do you learn and where is the time? I feel like I'm working all the time. So how would you think about this?
So the way I would think about it, Mana, is that, I would make learning as not the next thing I'll do after I have done my job, right? It has to become a part of my job, meaning it shouldn't be an afterthought. Everybody's life is so busy. Everybody's struggling to just keep up with what they've signed up for. If you are expecting folks to go beyond that and spend those extra few hours to learn something which is unrelated to their work, I think some people do it, of course, but it is hard.
Yeah.
So I would look at making learning as part of my integral role, right? Take up a role within the company, an SME role, for example. Saying
SME role is?
for example, I would say that for businesses, machine learning is important. We need to build an understanding of how machine learning can help improve our decision making in across businesses. And that is not going to just help me, but help everyone. So I raise my hand saying, let me work with the machine learning team and help everybody. I'll first do it in my team, but I'll help everybody. And then I take on that responsibility as a full on charter, as a goal on my goal sheet, versus it being a
Good to have.
an optional thing, right? So I'll just make it a part of my curriculum and not keep it outside. That's the way I would think it.
With that, we move into our last segment, this conversation. So this is called Fast Track. which is our version of the rapid fire round. I'm going to share with you like very short prompts and you can kind of share whatever's top of mind for you on these, right? So here we go. One skill or learning which unlocked growth for you.
For me, I think it is just operate without fear of failure. Yeah, it just removed all constraints from my mind. And I knew that if I'm doing my job well, it just allowed me to always raise my hand on the most difficult problem that came up that was there in the horizon. I struggled on few, I succeeded in few. I think I built equity which I wouldn't have otherwise built.
A workplace myth that you once believed in but no longer do.
Yeah, that life becomes easier as you rise up the ladder.
Somebody sold you that. Fair enough. One underrated skill early in your career.
I would think that ability to earn people's trust, which helps you build strong relationships. So people think that I come to work, do my job, and I go home. So it's good. But if you are doing that extra bit, earning people's trust and building those relationships, I think your job becomes easier. What otherwise needs to follow a standard mechanism, like in the engineering world, you have office hours and all of that. You don't need to wait for office hours. You can get stuff done outside of that. Just helps you operate so much more smoothly, so much more quickly than others.
How do you actually earn trust? How do you build relationships? Because this very easily sounds like, okay, you should network, you should schmooze. I don't think that's what you're referring to, right? So, how do you earn trust? How do you build relationships?
Yeah, I think earn trust is just when you're working. I'm not saying go for chai, coffee, cigarette breaks, or go for drinks after work. All that's you want to do it, do it. But in my mind, that doesn't matter too much. What matters is when you're working with someone, when you're partnering with someone, how close, if it's their problem and you are helping, how closely you work with them to make them feel that no, it's your problem also, and how deeply you integrate with what they are doing to ensure that they are successful, so that they are invested then in your success. If sometimes things go wrong, do you own up your mistake or not, or you're always deflecting it on someone? It's okay to say yes, I was wrong, and then that person builds trust in you, saying that okay, this person is one I would want to work with, and tomorrow if you want to go back and work with that person, then that just becomes so much more simpler.
It's counterintuitive, but it's so powerful, right? Which is like admitting mistakes earns trust. The next one is one thing that young professionals should do more of.
I would just go back to the learning bit, Anna. Learn and be curious is what we call that in Amazon lingo. I think if you're not learning, I think it's going to hurt.
And for you, learning is like raising your hand for that project, like making it part of the curriculum, basically. Yes. Now we're going to get very tactical and situation specific, right? So this one is one tip for effective meetings.
Just prepare, prepare, prepare. There's no shortcut to it.
Yeah. And I guess what you're saying is it gets easier with time. One way to make your boss's life easier.
You do your own job well and then seek help only where needed. I think your boss would be happy to take his eyes off you and focus on other priorities. You tell him that this is under control. I'll ping you when I need help. I think that just helps.
The next one is how do you push back without sounding defensive? Right? I think it's a tricky balance to learn.
I think that's a fair question, and it comes naturally to some people. It does not come so naturally to others. What I think helps is just letting people know that why you are saying no, and what's the trade-off. That if instead of saying no, if you say yes, then what falls off the priority list, and making that trade-off clear, saying I'm saying no to you because I'm focusing on this, which you will agree is important or more important. If you don't agree, then we can have a discussion. I think just making your thought process clear, I think people hesitate. I think you should just be open and transparent, and that just helps.
So it's like you walk them through your decision making and they'll see it. The next one, and this is again, I think a big pain point, right? Which is how do you handle tough feedback? It's not easy.
You should just actively listen and not react. What very often starts happening is someone's giving you a tough feedback. You immediately start reacting, saying, "Oh, no, that doesn't sound like me." Or you start thinking, "Oh, does that mean my ratings want to go down? What implications it has on my appraisal, etc., etc." You're not listening. You're just overthinking and reacting. So again, if you have the same outlook, it's not the feedback or an evaluation of my last year, but it's feedback that will help me live my next 20, 30, 35 years better. Then it helps you absorb better. If you're just actively listening, and if you disagree, you can, once the person is done, you can still call out. I'm not saying that everything has to be accepted, but hear that person out with an open mind. Everybody has blind spots, and fixing some of those just helps you. I know it's hard.
Yeah, easier said than done.
Easier said than done. But if you're just actively listening, and if you disagree, you can, once the person is done, you can still call out. I'm not saying that everything has to be accepted, but hear that person out with an open mind. Everybody has blind spots, and fixing some of those just helps you.
All of it makes sense. I think the point on not thinking of it as an evaluation but as input to the future makes a ton of sense, right? This is the last one we ask everyone, which is one book or blog that you read that you would recommend.
For me, Anna, I think what helps me, of course, there are a ton of books, right? I don't need to go around recommending books to people, but it again is a function of what appeals to you as an individual. For me, I just react much better to stories, and stories of individuals, stories of how their early life has been, what triggered them to take on to start their businesses, and how they went about scaling that business. One format that works very well for me is just I listen to David Rubenstein. His interviews I like a lot. They are about 25-30 minutes, and I have always enjoyed. And there's some bit from each leader that resonates with you that you can pick. So that format I like. I also like some of the interviews that Stanford Business School does. They're about 50-minute odd interviews with successful business leaders. Books, of course, there are a ton of them. The one that I'm currently reading, and for me, when I'm reading books, I'm more looking at innovation as a theme on how to drive innovation. So I think 0 to 1 is a good book for startups. But the one that I'm currently reading is Loon Shots, which is how do you create the right environment for innovations to succeed and scale within a rigid, large organization. That's a tricky balance. It's all maybe easier to innovate in a startup where everybody's just doing that versus in a large established company.
Yes.
Where you have 95% of the business coming from something and you're saying that I'm going to disrupt this one. So how do you set that balance? I think that one's tricky. So that's the book that I'm currently reading.
Super interesting. It's something I'm curious now to pick up. And I agree. I think for me, my dad used to tell me to read biographies, and when I was younger, it just didn't make sense. But now I find that I pick up so much from even something that's not directly related, right? Like, it doesn't have to be a business person, it can be somebody very different. In fact, like my quirk, and we do this on the Career Starter Kit, is we have something called Filmy Fun Day. So I love watching filmy content and I get gems from there. Last week, we had written about feedback, and then there was Amir Khan's interview where he was talking about how he loves doing like film screenings, and people think like, why would you do a screening? But for him, it's like feedback, and he uses that to improve the film. So yeah, so I feel like you can pick up gems from even unrelated fields. So on that note, Vikram, this was so many actionable things and so many mindset shifts. Thank you for this enriching conversation. Any parting thoughts for your younger self, or, to people who are out there?
Anna, thanks for this opportunity. This has been wonderful. If I had to share like one last line of summary, I would just say for a younger self of mine that just be unafraid and keep an eye on upskilling yourself. Keep learning. You'll keep growing.
Sounds good. This was a lovely conversation. Thank you, Vikram.
Thank you.